chest-bursting chaos, a killer's grand entrance, and some of the most iconic taunts of all time. Who knew it was all unscripted? Wes Craven's slice-and-dice game-changer Scream hit theaters in 1996. Right away, the movie shook up the old slasher movie conventions of the previous decade, from its non-virginal final girl, Sidney Prescott, to its hip-to-the-genre teens who toss around the barbed insults and sly remarks conceived by screenwriter Kevin Williamson.
Let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel!
One of the film's funnier moments takes place in the climax. On the Scream Blu-ray commentary, Williamson admits that the character of Stu was a little underwritten. But it was no problem for Matthew Lillard, who ad-libbed several of Stu's lines throughout filming. During this particular scene, Stu and Billy have revealed to Sidney that they're behind the spree of killings, but she slips away, calling to taunt Billy on the phone from elsewhere in the house. At this point, Skeet Ulrich was supposed to rage throw the phone at the nearby kitchen countertop, but because of the slippery theatrical blood covering his hands, this happened.
Even the phone, dick!
It's a great moment of levity in the eye of the movie storm, sweetened all the more by the satisfaction of seeing Sidney dispatch these two psychopaths just moments later. The chestburster sequence in Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi horror masterpiece, Alien, is one of the most shocking moments in movie history, and that's in large part because the cast's reaction to it is totally genuine. Prior to this scene, John Hurt's character was infected by a face-hugging alien, which impregnated him with a baby xenomorph. No one on the ship knows this yet, however, and they're all shocked when he doubles over during mealtime and then begins to seize up. As they try to restrain him, the baby alien shoves its head through his ribcage. The only actor completely in on the whole thing was Hurt, because he had to go through special effects prep and setup. The rest of the cast was kept in the dark, beyond the fact that something would come out of his chest. When they arrived on set that day, though, they noticed that the cameras were covered in plastic and the crew were all wearing raincoats. Clearly, there was going to be some kind of splash zone. But after a false start with only a tiny bit of blood and a not-too-threatening burster, the actors let down their guard. That's when Scott struck, sending real animal organs and gallons of fake blood in the cast's direction. The screams, gasps, and horrified faces of the cast are all very real, which sells the shock of the scene in a truly visceral way. Discussing the reaction of Alien actor Veronica Cartwright, H.R. Giger later said,
"She was so hysterical, she cries so much. I think it was real."
There are more than a few scary moments in the 1980 Stanley Kubrick movie, The Shining, but the vast majority of them are scripted. Kubrick was an exacting director who pushed his performers to the limit, so it's surprising that he even allowed an improvised line in one of his films. In fact, it was because Kubrick required dozens of takes for every scene that we ended up with one of the greatest improvised lines in cinematic history. During the climax of the film, writer gone mad Jack Torrance is chasing his wife Wendy around the empty Overlook Hotel. Wendy locks herself in a bathroom and Jack hacks his way through the door with a hatchet before peering in through the hole. Nicholson plays the part as completely unhinged, and he taunts Wendy as he attacks the door. When he manages to cut through enough to reveal his face, he sticks his head into the hole and shouts,
"Here's Johnny!"
This iconic line was improvised, referencing late-night talk show host Johnny Carson, who would be introduced the same way every night by co-host Ed McMahon. It was an easy-to-catch reference for Americans in 1980 that makes the film feel more lived in despite its supernatural story. The quote has gone on to be referenced far more from The Shining than its original usage on The Tonight Show, and it's all because of Nicholson's need to change things up after so many takes. Sir Anthony Hopkins only spends 24 minutes on screen in Silence of the Lambs, but his gripping performance as Hannibal Lecter earned him an Academy Award. It has since made him one of the most recognizable figures in horror history. Playing a brilliant forensic psychiatrist who also happens to be a murderous cannibal is enough to creep out audiences, but Hopkins truly made the character his own, providing multiple unscripted moments that helped make the film so memorable. Take this, for example.
"I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti."
That noise he makes wasn't in the script. As Hopkins tells it, it was simply an odd sound he was making on set, and figured it would be a creepy addition to an already unsettling line. But that's not all. When Clarice Starling first encounters Dr. Lecter from his cell, Ted Talley's script describes the moment as, "Dr. Hannibal Lecter is lounging on his bunk in white pajamas, reading an Italian Vogue. On screen, however, Hannibal Lecter is standing in the middle of the cell, staring directly at her with a curious expression on his face. In an interview between Hopkins and Foster as part of Variety's Actors on Actors series, Hopkins shared that he told director Jonathan Demme he'd like to be standing.
Okay. Why? I said, I can smell her coming down the corridor. He said,
Silence of the Lambs would have been a controversial success no matter what, but it's clear that Hopkins' unpredictable performance helped write the movie into the history books. One of cinema's most famous lines was actually a cheeky in-joke among its film crew. Steven Spielberg's 1975 adaptation of Peter Benchley's novel, Jaws, sees three men pursue a great white shark responsible for several attacks in their seaside town. Amityville Police Chief Martin Brody, oceanographer Matt Hooper, and seasoned shark hunter Quint. Having found the shark, a huge beast that later takes the pithy fishing vessel down with ease, Brody delivers a simple line with gravity to the ship's captain.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This wasn't exactly an ad-lib, though. Carl Gottlieb, both co-writer of the adapted screenplay and bit actor in the film, later told The Hollywood Reporter that production on the set of Jaws was notoriously stingy. In particular, producers Richard Zanuck and David Brown overloaded the boat to such an extent that the words, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," later became a go-to catchphrase behind the scenes. It was used by the movie's crew for everything from a delayed lunch to technical issues. Basically, any situation that meant those crew members were poorly equipped for the job. So during this scene, Roy Scheider infused the movie crew's frustration into the story, sprinkling the phrase into his dialogue on various occasions during filming. The one that stuck is the one that lives on the big screen today, and in the mouths of anyone woefully unprepared for the task before them. Rowdy Roddy Piper was, without a doubt, one of the greatest professional wrestlers in history. Fellow WWE Hall of Famer Ric Flair once described Piper as the most gifted entertainer in the history of professional wrestling upon his induction to the Hall in 2005. Before John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson proved that wrestlers could be bona fide Hollywood superstars, wrestlers weren't often known for their acting chops. The biggest exception, however, was Roddy Piper. He had a recurring role as a dangerous wrestler named the Maniac on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and starred as Sam Hell in the cult hit Hell Comes to Frogtown. His biggest cinematic claim to fame, however, is starring as Nada in John Carpenter's masterpiece, They Live. As Nada realizes that Earth has been taken over by aliens that are hiding in plain sight to manipulate the masses, he embarks on a crusade to free humanity and defeat its captors. Nada is the ultimate everyman in this movie. If the ultimate everyman was also a talented professional wrestler who could dish out witty insults to aliens and easily fight Keith David for nearly 6 minutes straight. In the film's most memorable moment, Nada enters a bank with a gun and delivers the now famous line,
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
This line has since become a pop culture staple, with people who've never even seen They Live at least having heard of the reference. Notably, it was later famously referenced in the video game Duke Nukem and became a popular meme among younger generations as a result. Incredibly, the line was improvised by Roddy Piper, having not been a part of John Carpenter's original script. In space, no one can hear you rage quit. When people quote James Cameron's 1986 sci-fi action classic Aliens, the line that comes up the most often is a desperate one indeed. The movie finds a team of aliens stranded on a desolate, hostile moon, teeming with acid-blooded xenomorphs who mean to cocoon, impregnate, and otherwise slaughter the lot of them. It's during this mission that Colonial Marine and fan-favorite character Private Hudson surveys the situation and utters the iconic line,
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Cameron, who had previously helmed The Terminator and therefore knew a thing or two about memorable but doomed characters, encouraged the sizable cast of aliens to develop backstories for the characters they played. Some actors had enough experience to handle that kind of personal world building, but for Bill Paxton, who only had a few film credits to his name at the time, the task proved daunting. That said, Paxton noticed his character's jumpy, immature demeanor and decided that Hudson was, like many service members, an avid gamer. This meant that he was prone to hysterics when he failed to overcome the combat simulators on which he and his fellow Marines would train. So what better syntax to capture utter defeat than the near universal words, game over? The phrase was a pop culture grenade, and has since been repeated in a wide variety of movies, TV shows, albums, and comic books over the years, as well as video games, obviously. For this performance, Paxton earned a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor, and the undying devotion of horror fans worldwide.